Good afternoon. Thank you, Eric, for that introduction. And I'd like to thank the meeting organizers for this opportunity to speak with all of you at this important meeting about the ongoing clinical studies that we're conducting at Travere. We'll be talking about Harmony, but also other studies in the Pegtibatinase program. Okay, good. This is Pegtibatinase is being developed for Classical HCU. And I also want to thank my colleagues, especially Glenn Morrison and Shika Dano, for working on these slides. And just so it's clear, we expected a mixed audience of patients and families as well as researchers and scientists. It's pitched for that mixed audience. Some disclaimers first. Pegtibatinase is a drug that's currently being studied. It is not approved by any health authority like the FDA. It's being studied in people with classical HCU in a phase 1-2 study and 2 phase 3 studies. The phase 1-2 is called Compose. The 2 phase 3 studies are called Harmony and Ensemble. We'll be giving more details about those shortly. And you'll notice a classical music theme to go with classical HCU. The safety and effectiveness of Pegtibatinase are not yet established, importantly. So here is an outline of the presentation that will follow. HCU basics, current care, and then we'll get to each of the studies and discuss them in more detail. The goal is to understand what we currently know, what is still being studied, and what questions patients and their families can ask their care team about the trials if they're interested in participating. So when I saw the slide, I'm a big Harry Potter fan. I don't know if other people in the room are, but when they were talking about casting a charm spell, and you say it as Wingardium Leviosa, right? That's what I thought it was. So the pronunciation is Pegtibatinase. It's an enzyme replacement, and you say in 5 beats, and the middle syllable gets the emphasis. Around Travere, we refer to it by a nickname, Peg-T. So it's kind of a cuter, shorter way of saying it. So I don't want to spend too much time on this. We've heard a lot from experts and researchers about classical HCU. But in short, it is a disease that develops when the enzyme cystathionine beta-synthase, CBS, does not work properly or is missing altogether. And CBS is important for breaking down homocysteine, a building block of protein. So when it doesn't work, total homocysteine builds up in the body, and then this in turn leads to complications in the blood vessels, the brain, and neurological system, eyes and vision, as well as the bone and the skeletal system. So in classical HCU, the dietary intake of protein that comes from food generates homocysteine. And then in a healthy person with intact CBS, the enzyme breaks down homocysteine, and the homocysteine stays at healthy levels. In classical HCU, however, the protein intake from food causes the HCY to be made, but there is decreased enzyme activity or sometimes no enzyme activity, and then homocysteine builds up in the body. As we've heard this morning, HCU is often diagnosed after clinical symptoms are noticed. And in one European registry study, almost 3/4 of patients were diagnosed after initial symptoms, and only 15% were picked up on after family screening was conducted because there were relatives that were known to be affected, and only 13% as part of newborn screening. These registry results do vary by country and by the screening program, but looking at the very low rates of newborn screening, which is true for other congenital diseases, this really highlights how early detection can lead to better treatment, earlier intervention, and hopefully the prevention of serious complications from conditions such as HCU. HCU is progressive, the risks accumulate over a lifetime, and this slide illustrates a representative patient journey for people with classical HCU, where at the newborn stage, there may be no symptoms at birth. And then by the age of 6 to 10 years, there will be eye lens dislocation. And so then after early childhood, late childhood, then in adolescence, seizures may appear, other neurological conditions. And then by adolescence, teenager, young adulthood, blood and bone and blood vessel risk appear. By the age of young adulthood, 30 years or so, then the risk of blood clots becomes quite pronounced. And interestingly, it's not rare, but there are segments of the population that have elevated homocysteine as well, and they appear to be at increased risk for cardiovascular events, although not as high as those with classical HCU, because the levels there are usually much higher of homocysteine in the blood. The current guidelines are to target to keep homocysteine below 100 micromolar, but I think a lot of people believe that reducing these levels to as low as possible while supporting growth and nutrition and growing children is the key. And that's easier said than done, of course, because of the dietary restrictions and that you do need protein to grow adequately. So the care plan consists of a special low protein diet, sometimes medications, betaine or vitamin B6, as well as supplements like folate and vitamin B12. There are frequent ongoing checkups, medical checkups to look at blood tests and nutritional assessments, as well as annual exams for the organs that can be affected by classical homocystinuria. So namely in the eye, bone, and overall health and vascular health. The current treatments lower homocysteine in 3 main ways. So the restricting dietary protein, which is very challenging for patients and their families, is the first strategy. So that means less in and less generation of homocysteine. The second strategy is more out. So betaine helps recycle homocysteine using an alternative pathway, biochemical pathway. And then third, there's vitamin supplementation that could help facilitate any remaining intact CBS enzyme breakdown of homocysteine. These treatment plans, as you well know, are individualized by each person's metabolic care team. So even with available treatments, HCU continues to be a lifelong burden. Current treatment options rarely sustain these homocysteine reductions, and the dietary restrictions are difficult to follow and continue to be chronically required and affect everyone's daily life. The daily treatments are difficult to maintain, and there are periods of poor control which can cause acute incidents and lasting harm to organs. Therefore, new treatments are needed to provide better homocysteine control and improve clinical outcomes as well as quality of life. Therefore, pegtibatinase is being studied as a CBS enzyme replacement therapy and ultimately lower homocysteine in the body. It is designed to do what the normally functioning CBS enzyme normally does and lower blood homocysteine and reduce the toxic buildup of homocysteine in other tissues in the body. Importantly, pegtibatinase is not a gene therapy, and again, pegtibatinase is not FDA approved. There are 3 clinical studies that are helping researchers learn about the safety and efficacy and long-term benefits of pegtibatinase. The COMPOSE study is the early phase 1-2 study, which allowed us to gather some initial data about dosing, safety, and the effect of pegtibatinase on homocysteine levels in the blood. This includes patients aged 5 to 65 with classical HCU. Harmony is a later phase study, considered a phase 3, and it's to confirm the safety and efficacy of pegtibatinase and is currently ongoing and enrolls patients ages 12 to 65 years old. And then lastly, Ensemble is a long-term open label study that follows people after they have participated in Harmony and Compose, and it's by invitation for those people who have finished those studies and are interested in receiving long-term pegtibatinase treatment. So understanding trial terms you may hear during this discussion and other discussions you will have, a placebo is a lookalike treatment with no active drug, usually has the other components that are included in an active drug called excipients. And then a blinded study design is where the participants and the study doctors do not know who is getting the active treatment, in this case pegtibatinase, or the placebo. Randomized means that a computer assigns participants to a study group and treatment. And then pharmacokinetics is studying how pegtibatinase moves through the body and is metabolized, whereas pharmacodynamics studies how pegtibatinase affects the total homocysteine levels in the body. And then lastly, in contrast to blinded, open label means that everyone knows that which treatment is being given, whether it be an active treatment or a placebo. So Compose, the phase 1-2 study, was designed to learn what the best dose might be for later phases of study of pegtibatinase. It was the first study in humans and asked 4 questions. Is pegtibatinase safe in people with classical HCU? How does pegtibatinase move through the body and get metabolized? And how does pegtibatinase affect total homocysteine levels? The efficacy is the 4th point, is could pegtibatinase help people with classical HCU? So 6 groups of participants received doses of pegtibatinase or placebo up to 2.5 milligrams per kilogram twice weekly. And in this illustration, you can see the number of patients that were assigned to active drug in the colors, and then the gray symbols indicate those that received placebo. So for example, in group 1, which received the lowest dose of 0.33 milligrams per kilogram once a week, you can see that 3 of the study participants received active drug and 1 received placebo for that time of the blinded part. And so forth, all the way up to the higher doses, which were 1.5 milligram per kilogram twice weekly, as well as 2.5 milligrams per kilogram twice weekly. As you can see, each dose group included 3 to 5 participants, and the study was blinded. The participants and the doctors did not know what treatment assignment the patients received. And then after completing Compose, participants could choose to enter into Ensemble, and I believe almost all did choose to do that. The results of Compose demonstrated that the 2 highest doses lowered homocysteine below the guideline goal. And so you can see that in group 5, where there were 3 subjects who all had plasma total homocysteine of greater than 100 micromole, then on treatment, they all came down to below 100. And in group 6, there were 4 subjects. Similarly, they demonstrated what seemed to be clinically meaningful reductions in homocysteine after being on pegtibatinase treatment. One participant at the highest dose was able to increase their dietary protein intake without homocysteine increasing. And in this participant, before receiving pegtibatinase, the total homocysteine levels were elevated in the range of 40 to 50 micromolar, and they were reduced to the normal range below 15 micromolar without side effects. And then dietary protein restriction was relaxed, and the intake was increased without an increase in homocysteine. This is one patient. The finding is encouraging, but more studies and more data are needed for sure. One of the main conclusions from COMPOSE is that all doses of pegtibatinase studied to date were safe and well tolerated, and most side effects were mild and of limited duration. The most common side effects included injection site pain, since this is a subcutaneously administered therapy, with redness, itching, or other reactions in the skin. Hives occurred in 3 participants. One case was serious. However, after a brief treatment to treat that hives, the patient was able to resume pegtibatinase therapy without further issue. So, in summary, COMPOSE taught us that pegtibatinase was generally well tolerated at all the doses studied. Homocysteine dropped below 100 micromole with the 2 highest doses, and one patient was able to increase dietary protein intake and maintain homocysteine in the normal range. Important caveats, however, COMPOSE was a small study, as you saw, and therefore HARMONY is designed to confirm these results in a larger study. HARMONY is a global phase 3 study of pegtibatinase designed to confirm whether pegtibatinase is safe and effective for the treatment of classical HCU. So the questions here are, now efficacy becomes the focus, whereas safety was the focus for the phase 1-2. Does pegtibatinase lower homocysteine better than placebo? Second question is safety. Is pegtibatinase safe and well tolerated in a larger population with classical HCU? And then third, the clinical benefit. Does lowering homocysteine provide a meaningful benefit? HARMONY is now enrolling, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in the study design. So participation in HARMONY, this is an overview. The total duration of participation is up to 38 weeks. The first 4 weeks is screening. That's up to 4 weeks. It could be shorter. And then very importantly, up to the next 6 weeks is a diet standardization period, because the intake of dietary protein affects total homocysteine levels quite profoundly. We are working with the patients and dietitians at the study centers, and we have an overall dietitians overseeing the trial to standardize each patient's diet before they start a pegtibatinase or placebo. In the main treatment period, patients are randomized on a 1-to-1 ratio to either placebo or pegtibatinase, and they and their physicians, their care teams, do not know what they will receive. There is a 2-week initial period where the dose is increased as tolerated, followed by a 22-week chronic administration twice weekly of pegtibatinase or placebo. Then there is a 4-week safety follow-up period, or if patients choose, they can elect to enroll in the Ensemble long-term extension. Whereas in HARMONY, some people will receive pegtibatinase and some receive placebo. During Ensemble, everybody, including those assigned to placebo initially, will receive active drug. HARMONY is being conducted in 14 countries, over 4 continents. You can see illustrated here. And in multiple countries in Europe and in 2 countries in the Gulf region, as well as Australia and the US. You can see this is the clinicaltrials.gov listing that provides more detail about Harmony, its design, etc. To be eligible for participation in Harmony, you need to have a diagnosis of HCU with a baseline homocysteine level of at least 50 micromolar, be between 12 and 65 years of age, and weigh less than 160 kilograms, and be willing to and able to comply with all study procedures and maintain a stable diet and HCU-related medications, starting from the diet standardization portion all the way through the duration of the trial. Also, participants should not be pregnant or breastfeeding, and doctors will perform screening tests to determine if you are eligible to participate in Harmony. As been mentioned, the diet standardization period is extremely important and will help stabilize the dietary protein intake as well as the HCU medications and keep them stable throughout the duration of Harmony. Many metabolic dietitians are involved, including at the site and also at Travere, and patients' diets are regularly monitored throughout the duration of the study. The diet standardization period also includes a tool that's called SING, which stands for Simplified Ingested Nutrients Guide, which is a food questionnaire and a 24-hour dietary recall aid. Importantly, we do want to note that being on a protein-restricted diet is not required to participate if all the other eligibility criteria are met. So some practical participation questions that might arise, can I join if your age is between 12 and 65 years, your total homocysteines greater than 50 micromolar at baseline, and a patient meets other screening criteria that are detailed in the study protocol? Yes. Could I receive placebo? Yes. Again, because of the randomization, dose group is assigned by chance. What support is available? There is a robust travel program. Visit schedules are very clearly delineated, and there's study contacts that are available to assist with answering questions. The time commitment does involve a number of visits, injections, blood tests, and follow-up over the 24-week period of Harmony. What about diet? Diet and HCU medicines are to stay stable during the duration of the Harmony study. And then what happens after the conclusion of the Harmony study? Eligible participants may enter into the ensemble open label study by invitation. And so we really appreciate this opportunity to raise trial awareness about Harmony and ask that this community help spread the word. So Ensemble, as mentioned, is a long-term extension study, and it's also designed to assess the long-term safety, efficacy, and clinical benefit in participants from both Compose and Harmony. Participants are invited if they're eligible and can elect to have long-term treatment with Pegtibatinase. Again, all participants will receive active drug in this extension study, and the goal is to learn about the long-term safety, homocysteine control, and possible other benefits of Pegtibatinase given in the long term. Participation in Ensemble looks like this. There is a 2-week dose titration period after the end of the Harmony Ensemble washout, and then their treatment is started for 2 weeks. There is a self-administration component to this where there is training for 4 weeks for self-administration. And then there are other components of Ensemble to try to learn as much as possible from a rare disease population, which includes an optional protein tolerance modification substudy for those patients who are very well controlled and are felt to be safe to do so. Ensemble measures key endpoints at week 52, and again, there is a 4-week safety follow-up. And then this is the clinicaltrials.gov number for Ensemble at the bottom. Ensemble includes an optional protein tolerance sub-study, as was shown on the schemata in the previous slide. And this looks at whether some people may be able to add protein to their diet while keeping homocysteine controlled. This matters because in our research and from patient testimonials, dietary protein limits are a major burden and impacts overall the nutrition, especially in growing children. And we are testing whether dietary protein can be increased once a patient achieves homocysteine of less than 50, and whether that level can be maintained. So what is measured is the homocysteine control, as well as measures of patient experience and quality of life through what's called patient-reported outcomes using questionnaire tools. The STUB study is optional and will only be offered to eligible patients. So the key takeaways for families is that pegtibatinase is investigational at this time. It is not FDA approved. Compose was encouraging and provided initial data in a small population and a small study that higher doses of pegtibatinase did lower homocysteine to below the target of 100 micromolar. And of note, I showed you 6 cohorts, but the 7th cohort, which includes younger children, is enrolling soon. And that's for children ages 5 to 12. Harmony is currently actively enrolling. This is, again, the larger study that's designed to confirm safety and efficacy. And then finally, Ensemble is the open label active drug study clinical trial, and that includes a protein diet modification sub-study. So we really encourage interested patients and their families to talk with your metabolic care teams and bring up questions about whether clinical trial participation may be an option for you. Okay, thank you very much. And just want to mention that we do have Science 37, who's our partner in clinical trials, home-centered clinical trials, on site as well to talk more about Harmony and to provide even initial consent and screening on site during this conference for people who are interested, and also encourage people to go and visit all the booths, including our Trivia booth that's just outside of this room. Happy to take a few questions. Oh, okay. I think the diet standardization was not as, there was an attempt, but now in Harmony, I believe the diet standardization is a lot more effort. Yeah. No, they will be standardized to their own diets. It's just about consistency. Yeah. 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 Great. Okay. So let's go back to find the right slide. Probably this one. Yeah. Yeah. So as I understand it, I may need a call for a lifeline from some of the other team members. That it's a good 6-week period where there's intensive work with the dietitians to have the patients be on a very consistent diet during, that's defined. It's not that every patient's expected to be on the same diet with the same nutritional intake. I think that'd be very difficult, especially since patients have different needs, dietary needs as well. No. Yeah. Yeah. Why don't you come up here? Yeah. Oh, come on up. Miriam is our clinical operations lead for the Pegtibatinase program. Oh, come up. Come up here. I'm lonely. Okay. Okay.
Thank you so much for that question. And that's really a common question that we get asked because HCU patients are, you have a very strict diet that you're prescribed or may or may not be following. So for our study, as we mentioned earlier, as Julie had highlighted, we do not require participants to be following or in any diet. What we do ask is that when you join the study, that you maintain that diet that you came with. And that's the purpose of the diet standardization period. It's called diet standardization. It might be a little bit misleading when you hear it, but we're not standardizing the diet across the study. What it is to help the participants, when they come in, get used to the interactions with the site dietitian, get used to maintaining that diet that you have throughout the study. And during this period and throughout the Harmony study and all the studies that we have at Travere, you will receive support. In this particular period, will be with the site dietitian. The site dietitian will be working closely with you, having conversations with you about your diet and HCU therapy, and making sure that you're able to maintain that throughout. Some of you may have heard from our Compose study, the typical 72-hour diet diary. We've learned from that experience. We're not doing that in phase 3. I'm happy to share that with you. The diet monitoring that we have for phase 3 will be really with the site dietitians having a conversation with the participants. There are tools, optional tools that we'll be providing, but it's really to help you prepare for those conversations. I know I've said a lot. I'm so really passionate about this the study and especially this portion because I know there's a lot of support that we can give the participants and the patients. So if there are any further questions that you have, we're here. So that's a good question. So throughout the study, there are scheduled visits. I think for Harmony, there are about, 18 or so visits throughout because there's a screening visit and there's about 4 visits that we have for the DSP. Yes, we have. It's mostly to check their total homocysteine level to make sure that they're still meeting the eligibility criteria. In parallel with that, there's the sync tool that we're using where the site dietitian will have the interview with the participant and they will collect their information. And that's how we also look at whether or not they're maintaining a stable diet. But there are blood tests throughout to monitor the total homocysteine level. So make sure that it meets our study criteria.
Thanks, Miriam. Was there another question?
I was just going to actually add to that because I get this question a lot from patients about that because they're like, well, if it's not a low protein diet, what does that mean? And what they're looking for is consistency. And what you tend to see with patients is who are struggling, and I can relate to this, is, say your tolerance is 20. Some days you're at 25. Some days you're at 30. Some days you're at 10. That's what they're trying to avoid. So if you are overeating and you're prescribed 20, but you're eating 30, eat that 30 every day. So that way they know that it's not you adjusting your diet, it's the medicine working potentially. So that's what I think the key word Julie said is consistency. Be consistent. Even if you're having an off day consistently, at least that's consistent. And so I think that's really the important point. So
thank you for that. Yes. Yes, we're targeting 70 total. Should have highlighted that. If you look up here, it says approximately 35 participants randomized to Pegtibatinase and 35 to placebo. Yeah. Where are you? Oh, I don't think we're disclosing that.
We are getting momentum, and so that's why we're here to give awareness for the study. We do encourage you to please speak with us with Science 37 so we can hit our target of 70.
The numbers between 0 and 70, and it's not 0.
I think the other point is that you guys are going to be opening additional sites overseas. And so correct me if I'm wrong, but that 70 includes the patients in those regions as well.
Absolutely. It's a
so
globally.
Therefore, we want to make room for Europe, the Gulf region, and Asia specific too. So we don't want to just have met it yet, because then we exclude all those other wonderful sites that are participating. So more diversity.
Is there a minimum number that you have to enroll in the US?
That does not seem to be the case in discussions so far, right?
And one other quick question.
Yeah.
Compose. Everyone that participated in Compose is eligible for ensemble, or is there a screening?
I believe, yeah. Oh, yes. The question was, is everyone who was in Compose eligible for ensemble? And that actually, Compose cohort 7 is opening for the youngest children, as mentioned, but those in Compose cohorts 1 through 6 have completed the study. I think they're all in ensemble. Yeah. Okay.
But they cannot be in harm.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I clarify? So those are excellent questions. So first, for the study participation, we have most of our sites in the U.S. already open and actively enrolling. As Julie mentioned earlier, we have Science 37 outside, our fully decentralized study site. They're actually open for Harmony and Compose cohort 7. We also have brick and mortar sites. These are traditional clinics. Some of you may be affiliated with those clinics. They're also open. The clinicaltrials.gov post out here lists all of the study sites and will tell you which ones are currently open. As far as Compose, so the participants who went through Compose and entered into the open label extension within Compose, I think most of them have, actually all of them from the OLE went into Ensemble and are successfully in Ensemble. Now, if they were in Compose before and they stopped in Compose and are not currently in Ensemble, Harmony is for new participants. So they have to be naive to Pegtibatinase. So we can't have them go from Compose to Harmony. However, if you're going into Compose cohort 7, so that's why Ensemble, you saw the color scheme earlier, all of the participants from the previous studies or origin studies, they're invited to participate in Ensemble. Thanks.
Thank you again so much, everyone.